Welcome to a new episode of the Perspective Shift podcast. Today's episode is about the inner child, where we will be discussing the definition of the world itself and what it actually means, and why we as adults are often so disconnected with who we were as kids, and why it is so important to reconnect with that part of ourselves in order to cultivate growth in our lives. So we hope that you enjoy this episode, and let's get into it. So we have already mentioned the topic of today on multiple occasions in other episodes, and it is something that we always talk about. We have both discussed that the term could be misleading, maybe, and you could see it in different ways. But I want to ask you first: what does the inner child means to you? What does this term, this word, actually means? How do you define this inner child?
I think I've already mentioned this before that I don't like the terminology of inner child. The word itself, in the common sense and what's understood, I agree with that. But the terminology itself, I've got a problem with it because it makes it sound as if there's a child that's inside of you, and that kind of builds like a barricade that separates you with your supposed to be inner child.
Like it's a different.
Exactly. And I feel like when we start doing these separations, like how people go on like my demons, my inner child, my bad side, and then it's like you're separating them, and that kind of confuses.
I tend to agree.
Confuses you and your subconscious because technically it's all the same. It's all you. It's all parts of you. So it's not like you're gonna hide this part and show this part. It all just leaks out one way or another. But how I understand inner child is like how when we're kids and we're just like joyful, we want to explore,
being in the moment.
We're not worried about the risk, about the what ifs, what could, you know what I mean? And you're just like in the moment, you're experiencing, you're living, you're joyful, you're exploring, you're learning, and then I feel like that's the inner child.
Yeah, I tend to see it in that way, in the same way actually, but that only started recently. I mean, the internet plays a role. These terms, you hear them everywhere. Your inner child, and as you said, your inner demons, as if like you are shattered to these like hundreds of pieces that are not connected, and you have to tame all of them at the same time. But they are all you, and your inner child is, the way I see it, it is just your being, your consciousness, who you are when you were born, unaffected by all the thoughts and emotions and the opinions of others and all the things that you learn when you grow up. So I do tend to think that society plays a big role on why we have this separation when we grow up. Like, because they keep telling us what we should do when we grow up. You should go to university. I've already mentioned this on multiple occasions before, but it's really connected to this idea, to the idea of your inner child. That you have to do all of these things in order to grow up. You have to study in a good profession and become successful, get married, have kids, all of these things that are separating you from what you wanted to do with your authentic self, with your, when you were a child, the things that brought you joy and made you feel in the moment. So
I feel like also it's not just that society kind of makes the separation, but
it's not only society, but I think it plays a big role in
it does separation. Because so we're gonna get to a conclusion that I came to a few days ago in a little bit. But for starters, I think what happens to everyone, there's no exceptions here, is that I've mentioned this before. As a child, you believe that because you love the world loves you back. And then you get to the point where you start realizing that that's not true. It's not just because you love somebody that they love you back, and it's not because you love the world that the world loves you back. And I think that's when you start building kind of those coping or defense mechanisms, because you realize that, okay, the world is not, I don't want to say the word pure, but from your eyes, the world doesn't function the way that you expect it to be, and it's not. And there's malevolence, there
are consequences.
There are consequences, there's responsibilities, there's negative things that could happen. There's circumstances, there's all of these kind of things that as you grow older, that you start realizing that this is how the world actually functions. And then I feel like that kind of leads us to putting these shields, these mechanisms to defend ourselves.
Sure. To protect
Because
ourselves.
exactly, it's like this is who I am innerly, and I've been exposed to too much stuff, and now I want to put barriers around it. So whenever I experience something else, the barriers are gonna stop it from hurting or being as joyful.
But now
And then everyone talks about these things as if this is what an adult is, and the relation there is literally just the fact that you experience these things as you get older, and it's just part of life.
Sure.
And people start interpreting these circumstances as if this is what adulthood is supposed to be.
Yeah. Okay, but this is actually brings me to my question. Is this a natural reaction that we have to protect ourselves, to make this separation? Or is this something that is taught generationally? That did this start somewhere when there was a lot of, I don't know, misery in the world and people starting to act in a certain way, and they started to teach their children their ways, and when you grow up you have to be tough, you have blah blah blah, all the things, and it became our default state with time. The question is this something that we have evolved to do, or is it something that we were just taught, learned from our parents, and they learned from their parents? It's a bit complicated, I think.
I happen to believe that it's a mix.
It's a mix.
It's a mix because you don't think about the fact that you want to do something and protect yourself.
It happens subconsciously.
It just happens subconsciously. It happens, and the fact that it doesn't randomly happen, but it happens to every single human being on the planet.
Yeah.
That's why I believe that it's related to evolution and the way our brain wired as a human species. But at the same time, I feel like it's generational because parents always raise their kids the way they wish they were raised.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? So if a child, they were raised
overprotective.
Exactly. They either become overprotective or they become over harsh. Like, no, you have to be tough. You this, that's life. Just suck it up, and this kind of stuff. That's because their parents didn't tell them as when kids that, this is life or something like this, and they wish that someone told them these cold, harsh truths. So now they tell it to their kids, and then kind of like, I don't want to call it a curse, but it's something that just gets passed from one generation to another. And it's like, for me at least, I'd like to believe that it's like a circle, where this generation did this, but the next generation is going to do quite the opposite, which is going to lead the generation after that to do what happened in the beginning.
Yeah, the opposite of
exactly. That. And then it's just going to go in a circle.
It's a loop.
So it's kind of generational that we market it so much and we talk about it so much, but I feel it's also related to evolution, the way that we build these coping mechanisms. Are they related to adulthood? I don't think so. I think that's what the generations has made it up to be.
I think adulthood is a myth. Like, there is maturity.
It kind of is. Do you know, like, think about it this way. Do you know the quote that everyone literally goes about saying, men will always be men?
Yeah, I never relate.
In the sense of like
boys
how
will be boys, like.
No, in the sense of like, how you can have like a grown up man who's like 40 and he's still playing with like diners or something like this, and that's where the quote exactly.
So that's why I think adulthood is a myth.
Exactly,
but maturity is a real thing.
I'm using this example to back up what you just said. So like, men will be men, as in like, it doesn't matter how old you are, you still get to be acting like a child sometimes.
It's the same also when you are on your journey and many years have passed and you see that you have changed so much, but then you meet someone. I mean, this happened to me lately when I went to Turkey for a visit. I visited my parents, and I met my aunt who I haven't seen for 10 years. And she noticed that, yes, I've changed a lot, but there are a lot of things that it is still me. It is still Anas when he was like 13, 14 years old, and it's exactly who you are. Nothing changed. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just the things that made you who you are, they're still you.
This is who you are.
There are certain things that you hide, that you bury, but there are certain things that stay the same. So I guess this answers the question why we bury our inner child so deep within. It's just to protect ourselves.
Just sort of protection.
Yeah, it's just a self-defense mechanism.
I've come up with this. Like I mentioned, I've come up with something that I wanted to mention on this episode. It's something that occurred to me like 2 days ago. It's when you start with the self-improvement journey, you're always focusing on fixing. You know,
Sure.
You're like, okay, I've got this problem, I have to fix it. I have this issue personally, which is like I react in a way that I don't want to, so you try to fix it.
Yeah.
And then I have bad sleeps, I want to fix my bad sleep. I don't know, I'm this, I want to do this. It's a fixing process. For me at least, I don't know how it is for other people. Me at least, when I started connecting more with my inner child, I'm doing this because I hate the term. When I started connecting more with my inner child, I noticed the difference was that I stopped wanting to fix things. Instead, I wanted to build things.
Sure. Realizing things and connecting things, maybe in a way.
Building things. So instead of going on like, all right, I'm this guy and I've got this pile of shit issues that I want to work on, my mindset shifted to like, I'm this guy with this pile of shit. Instead of fixing this pile of shit, I kind of want to build this guy who has this specific pile of shit. It's still a pile of shit, but you went from like, okay, I want to fix these issues to like,
there's no problem.
I want to explore and I want to build.
There's no problem to be fixed.
And I kind of related that to my childhood as well, where I've always wanted to build habits, build this and this, and not fix things. You know what I mean? At the beginning, you're focusing on fixing. And I feel like we tend to build these defense mechanisms because we realize that building things is hard and it could crash down on our heads and lead to a lot of problems. So we start making sure that we're not building anything new. We're just existing.
Yeah.
And then when you start going down and figuring this out and doing the work and this, and you start realizing that inner child, you kind of always wanted to build something. And then these mechanisms are just there to stop you from building because you're afraid of the consequences or the outcome of what that could lead to.
That is why, we talk so much about self-improvement and growth. And I think you have to go back to your childhood self, your inner child, whatever term you want to use, to actually grow, to actually find real growth, not the temporary one, not the fixing problems as you have mentioned. It's like you need to realize what are the things that you like, what are the things that you dislike, your brain wiring, the things that you prefer in the world. And if you're not connected to that child self, it's really hard to figure that out. Because many of us, when we bury this child self, when we bury our inner child, we are stuck in the things that we are doing right now that we think that we enjoy. How do you make sure this is actually what you want if you don't remember what you prefer to do when you were like 5, 6, 7 years old, whatever? And
that's a good question.
It's like, I think it's just underestimated how important that is. Like, you would ask anyone, hey, you remember what you used to do when you were a child? Yeah, I used to play Lego. I used to, they tell you always the same things, but there are more nuance. There are more details that you have. Maybe ask your parents, maybe meditate, find ways so that you can build your memories back up to remember more things. This is something that I've struggled with for years, that my childhood memories are very vague and they're so far in between. But when you go back to these moments more and more and you talk about them, these details start to reveal themselves and you realize more stuff. Okay, I used to like to play Lego, but I used to like doing especially that thing. Just more nuance about what you like to do and why you like doing that. And I think this is just extremely important. You want to figure out what you really want to do in life and finding your purpose and just so many things.
It's if you don't reconnect your supposedly inner child. Sorry,
we're struggling.
I hate the word. I genuinely hate.
We're struggling to find
the terminology of a lot of things that we use nowadays. I don't really hate them. Just to be clear here, I feel like there's there's definitely better terms that we can use, so we can stop with this separation between who we are, as if you know what I mean.
I tend to. I
Um,
mentioned this to you before. Like, I like to use these type of terms because these are the known terms.
exactly,
So
exactly. Which is why I'm using them
you have to
myself.
go with it. You have to go with it. Just
But if you don't go back to your inner child and try to remember who you were as a kid, what you did as a kid, why you did what you did as a kid, then you will never know why you put these self-defensive or coping mechanisms. And if you don't get rid of them, or at least try to understand why you have them,
that's the other side of the coin. From what I have
exactly,
talked about.
exactly. If you don't know why you have those and what purpose they serve, you cannot get rid of them.
Yeah.
And if you can't get rid of them, you cannot start building the life that you want. That's at least my own personal belief.
So basically, whatever trait that you have, positive or negative, whatever character trait, you have to go back to your inner child, your childhood self, to figure out why you have that trait in the first place.
It doesn't necessarily have to be your inner child. So, sorry, it doesn't have to be your inner self, your younger self.
Yeah.
I'm mixing things here a lot. So, it's in the sense of, you know, the quote that goes like, the things that you learn in your teens are the things that you have to unlearn in your 20s.
Sure.
The things that you learn in your 20s are the things that you have to unlearn in your 30s. And the cycle goes on. It's not only your child, your childhood self, but it's also the you from the past years.
But this, I think you misunderstand here, because I mean, if you go back to, let's say you're anxious, you're an anxious person.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back to your childhood self and you remember that you weren't so much anxious back then, then you can backtrack and remember when did it happen
You
exactly.
can only connect the dots backwards. You can never connect the dots forwards. That's a rule that I lived by for a long time. But that means, at least for me, that if I'm working on something within myself, I would never start with my childhood first. I would always start with me from the past few years, and then from there on, I would just go back in time till I get to my childhood, till I know the sequence of why. Okay, so like this happened, and then I reacted to this way, which is the reaction that I've got right now. But the first initial reaction is related to another event from a few years ago, which is related to another event, whatever that happened in my childhood. So if I know what happened in my childhood, I won't be able to connect it to what happened later. But when you can connect it backwards, you can kind of backtrack every event and every circumstance that led you to, I don't know, disbelief, be the way that you are.
But when you say it this way, I do agree with that. But there are things that, let's remember that there are things that are more in your genes, more in your
Oh yeah, definitely.
And there are things that you have learned. So
definitely.
When you have a clear image of who you were as a child, what you like to do, there are things that you know that they are integrated in you, things that you cannot necessarily change. You can alter them a little bit, but there are things, if you are, some people are just more on the negative side of things, that they perceive the world in a more negative way, pessimistic way. They can be a little bit more anxious. But some people are not like that, but they have learned that
to be that, yeah,
because of traumas and things that happen in later years. So when you have your inner child phase clear, you know how you were, you can just rule things out from what you're trying to work on and trying to figure out, I guess. But the things that you said about like backtracking and, you know, starting to go back from recent years and then slowly going back, I agree with that when it comes to other things that you're trying to figure out about yourself.
That's true. It kind of depends on
it just
on what you're trying to approach. Sorry, what you're trying to achieve.
What you're aiming to approach. For? What are you trying to build? What are you trying to
that makes a lot of difference whether you do this or that. But yeah, ultimately it's kind of the same thing, and just different approaches, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question, which is, how do you actually integrate your inner child in your adult life? And I know I'm using wrong terms here. I know I'm saying that
I'm gonna
adult life is a myth and inner child doesn't exist. But
I'm gonna be generous and I'm gonna let it go.
Let's just go with the
You're
flow.
forgiven for today, at least.
Let's go with the flow. And how do you integrate your inner child in your adult life? How do you become one? How do you connect all of these messy parts that we think that they are separated? How do you start to realize that this is who you are, this is how you're going to continue living?
By fully accepting and embracing yourself.
How do you do that?
It's a really simple question. How you do that? That's not something that I can tell you.
They have
okay.
Someone have just let's say there's someone have just realized I need to find out who I was as a child. I know it's very important. I just don't know how to begin with that. How do you start to go back to something that you haven't connected with for years and years and years?
It's like you're calling, like it's like a phone call. Like you're calling somebody and that person is not picking. Yeah. And then you try, and then you try, and then they don't pick. They don't pick up. They don't answer for weeks, maybe for months, maybe for a couple of days only, if you're lucky. And at some point, that phone is going to get picked up. 100%. When? That will depend on many factors, I believe, that are related or that happen in your life. But that phone is going to get picked up at some point. And that phone get picked up at some point. You can't instantly expect yourself to be able to have a 2 hours conversation with that. You know, it's a like, hi, it's like me. I wanted to check in on you. You know,
like an old friend you haven't met in years.
Exactly. And then you just start slowly. You know, you try again and you try again, and at some point, the phone calls will be bigger. So it's like, you know, when you're talking to your child or you're connecting with them,
less awkward.
It will become more natural. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you need to integrate it, because the word integrating again sounds as if it's not part of you and you're just adding it to your life. That's why I said that I cannot tell you how to do it. It's just something that
for everyone is different.
For everyone is different. And then of course, when you start connecting, it's not like, because you're not integrating something. In fact, you're just unlearning the things that you've learned to defend yourself, to protect that inner you, if you want to call it that, that genuine, pure you. It's not about integrating, it's about unlearning the things that you've taught yourself for years.
Changing your perspective on so many things.
Basically. Exactly. And so this is not an idea from me. This is something that I've read on social media, and I've told you about it before. Like in meditation, when
I wanted to ask you, I know where you're going.
A meditation where you imagine
it's
yourself.
For you. This is something it's something that
I
didn't really work for me.
Exactly.
Just as a starter.
It's like you're closing your eyes, you're meditating, and you're imagining yourself to be in this space, whatever the space is. And in this space, there's a house, a door, a room, whatever you want to call it. And behind that door, behind that entrance, is the inner you, the child you, sitting in there behind all these barricades and these walls and this defense mechanism waiting for you. So the kind of meditation that I did was meditating that I'm in an open space, completely open space. And there was like this wall with a door, and then I would open the door, and when I take the first step in, it's like I'm back in my younger self. And of course, for like every year, every circumstance, every event, every this and this, there was a different room that I could walk in, and this is okay, like this is me from when I was 10 years old, and then I would see myself doing something that I like to do at this time. Maybe anxious, or maybe worried, maybe scared. I don't know. Depends on the year, depends on the circumstances as well. And then I would just go in and just talk to this younger inner me. Try to have a little bit of understanding, a little bit of empathy. And then once I'm done and I got to know this guy, I would just move on to the next room. The next room again represents another younger version of you. Would that work for everybody?
No.
I probably...
I know it, like...
I think it would. I think I would like to believe
something. It would lead you somewhere.
Exactly. I would like to believe that it would lead you somewhere.
Yeah, it will.
Would it be as smooth as I just described it to be?
It's gonna definitely be not. Definitely it's gonna be different.
And it's going to be different as well. Exactly.
Like even when you mentioned this big idea of rooms and everything, when I tried to meditate, I didn't see that. Like for me, it wasn't as visual as the way you are mentioning.
That's okay. I guess that's the difference, because that's how I kind of decided to make it for myself.
Yeah.
I don't wanna. So when I was doing that exercise as well, I was imagining that this space defines me from this year. And I've got another space that defines me from this year. Just because I wanted to kind of be able to backtrack it.
That's why it worked for you.
Exactly.
But the same example might not work for other people.
Definitely.
But I think it is something to try, just like so many other things. What worked for me the most?
Exactly.
I did a lot of psychedelics. That's what worked for me the most. But this might not work for someone else. You need to try different things. So like, there are a lot of different approaches. How do you actually reconnect? And as I mentioned before, you could talk to your parents and talk to people who knew you when you were a child. They might remind you of something that you never talked about before, and that idea, that thought, is gonna become a train of thought that's gonna lead you to new memories.
A seed.
It's a seed.
It's a seed that you're planting, and it's gonna take time to grow.
Or maybe that's why.
So
like, even going back to neighborhoods. I mean, we come from Syria, so this is difficult for us. But
I would go on
that you grew up.
I will go on and put this out there just as an example and just as a scale so people know. I've started trying to reconnect with my inner child, or trying to reconnect with who I actually am, about like 4 or 5 years ago.
About the same time as
something like this. And I've actually put in the extreme effort in order to do this about a year and a half ago, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put it out there. It's been going pretty well for me. Do I think that I've accomplished this pure state of this is who I am and there's no difference this and this between me? No, I did not.
Journey.
Exactly. So I know that I'm, for a huge part, for the most part at least, I know that I'm more excited about a lot of things. I'm willing to explore a lot of things more. I'm kind of going back to how I used to be more as a kid. Exactly. Just more willing to live life, you know? But of course, there's still a lot of stuff to take care of, which is like when stuff happen that reminds you of adulthood or whatever people the fuck call it nowadays, a clash is gonna happen. And then it's in these moments where you start reminding yourself, like, it's okay, this and this, you know? And what I want to go with this is, don't expect it to be a smooth ride, and that's only gonna take you a few tries, maybe a few months. Like I've said, I've been on this path for like 4 years, which is not much to be honest. When you compare it to other people,
sure.
And with the extreme focus since a year and a half, and I'm definitely seeing results and noticing a lot of differences. Even people around me are noticing a lot of differences. But I don't think I'm there yet, and it's been 4 years. Just keep in mind that it's gonna take long. It's gonna take time, like everything else.
Yeah. And you're gonna have to try different approaches how to do this, just like so many other things. Basically, when you're trying to in your self-improvement journey, whatever you want to call it, there are always different approaches to try. You can hear something we said. You can hear something you read in a book. You can hear something on a YouTube video. Everyone is talking about different things that you could try. Certain things will work out, other things won't. It's all about self-awareness and approaching the thing and trying different things to see what will work for you. This is something that we could say in every podcast episode, and I would never get tired of that. That you need to try things, and it's okay if they don't work out. It's all about going on the path, I guess. Yeah.
It's always starting.
Starting, exactly.
Getting started is always
planting the seed and seeing where it goes.
Yeah.
That's all that matters, actually. Taking action, doing things less than thinking about things. Yeah, I think that's it for this episode. And if you managed to reach the end of it, thank you for watching. And please give us any feedback, what you think about the episode, about the topic, and generally what we talk about. So, yeah, like and subscribe if you like the content, and see you in the next one.
See you next time.